Bonjour, my name is Miss Liz, Fancy Miss Liz, from the Valley Community Library, a Gold Star library. Did you know that during November, my friend Fancy Miss Danielle and I will be offering a Family Histories Explorer program? Explorer is a fancy word for someone who discovers things. During this season, we often focus a little extra on our families. Miss Danielle taught me another splendid fancy word, genealogy, which is the study of the history of families and ancestors. So during this month, we will have activities that you can pick up in the vestibule, and they will be available digitally in PDF format on our website. And they're activities for the entire family, for kids about ages 7 and up, through teens and adults, all about exploring your family tree and your family history. So I have a wonderful book to read. This is a very fancy book. Look at this. This is called Fancy Nancy, My Family History. Do you know about your ancestors? They are people in your family who lived long ago. You say it like this, ancestors. Isn't that a great fancy word? We are writing ancestor reports in class. Bree is writing about her great-grandfather. He's 90. He was a war hero. Robert's great-grandmother is 100. She came to America on a ship. It almost sank. You're both lucky, I tell my friends. You know your ancestors. All of mine are deceased. That's a fancy word for dead. That night, my grandpa calls. He's coming to visit soon. His parents are my great-grandparents. So I ask, were they famous? Did they have adventures? Grandpa says no. They were nice, ordinary people. Ordinary. That's like plain. I wish I had fancy ancestors. Later that night, Grandpa sends a photo of my great-grandfather. Grandpa's email says, my dad was kind and honest. He only lost his temper once. I broke a teapot and blamed my sister. My dad wasn't upset about the teapot. He was upset that I lied. Your dad sounds like a very lovely person, I reply. Reply is fancy for answer. I'm going to write my report about him. I gather facts from Grandpa. My ancestor had 5 children. He was a bank guard. He liked to fish, and he lived to be 74. The next day, I illustrate the cover. Illustrate is a fancy word for making a picture. Then I start writing my report. It begins, my great-grandpa was a bank guard. It doesn't sound very exciting. So I add something extra. Once he stopped a bunch of bank robbers. Oh yes, that sounds very exciting. Next I write my great-grandpa loved to fish. Then I add some more exciting stuff. One time he caught a shark. The next day, Clara and Yoko both read their reports. I do not mean to brag, but mine is way more interesting. After school, I tell my parents, on Friday I get to read my report. My dad says, great, Grandpa's coming on Thursday. He can go to school with you. He is so proud your report is about his dad. I forgot about Grandpa coming. All of a sudden, my tummy feels funny. I don't think he's allowed to come, I say. My mom looks at me. Of course he can come. Don't you want him to come? Upstairs, I show my mom my report. I wanted it to be interesting, so I exaggerated. Exaggerate is a fancy word for stretching the truth. Honey, Mom says, you didn't just exaggerate, you made up stuff. That's lying. I remember the story about the broken teapot. My ancestor would be very upset with me. My grandpa will be too. By the time Grandpa comes, I have written a new report. This time I stick to the plain truth. I write about the teapot. It is an ordinary story, but I really like it. On Friday, Grandpa comes to school. He has brought his dad's top hat. It's a real one, not like the one in my magic set. My great-grandpa loved to get dressed up, I tell everyone. I must get being fancy from him. The end. Thank you so much for joining me for this wonderful story. Fancy Nancy, My Family History, written by Jane O'Connor.